Welcome to the channel Hidden Coin Value. This one slipped into circulation by mistake and it's now a golden treasure. Somewhere out there, sitting in a forgotten drawer, a dusty coffee can, or even rattling around, it has been spent, stacked, dropped, and ignored 1,000 times over. Nobody looked twice at it. But that one quarter, that single, unremarkable looking coin, is worth more than most people make in an entire year of hard work. Today, we are talking about the 1997 quarter dollar. And yes, you heard that right, a coin from your everyday pocket change. A coin that most people would use to pay for a parking meter, or toss into a tip jar without a second glance. But this particular 1997 quarter has sold, in verified condition, for a staggering $19,000. Let that sink in for a moment. $19,000 for a coin with a face value of 25 cents. That is not a typo, and it is not an exaggeration. It is the reality of the rare coin world, a world where a tiny mint mistake, a razor-thin sliver of metal, or a doubled image invisible to the naked eye, can transform pocket change into a life-changing fortune. And before we go deeper into this coin's incredible story, I want you to stay with me until the very end of this video. Because this is not the only coin we are covering today. There are 4 more quarters waiting for you after this one, and I promise you, each one gets more shocking than the last. I am not going to tell you their values yet. I want you to discover them for yourself, coin by coin, story by story. But I will say this, by the time we reach the final coin on today's list, you are going to be stunned. So if you have any old quarters lying around your house right now, do not put down your phone. Go find them. Because after watching this video, you are going to want to check every single one. Now, let's get into the story of the 1997 quarter and how a coin minted right here in Philadelphia became one of the most sought-after error coins of its era. To understand why this coin is so valuable, we have to go back to 1997 itself. At that time, the United States Mint was still producing the classic Washington quarter design, the same design that had been in circulation, largely unchanged, since 1932. George Washington's profile on the front, the eagle with outstretched wings on the back. It was a design so familiar, so common, that almost nobody paid attention to the quarters passing through their hands. The Philadelphia Mint, marked with that small p mint mark, was pumping out hundreds of millions of these quarters that year, feeding cash registers, vending machines, and piggy banks all across America. Nobody at the Mint, and certainly nobody spending these quarters, had any idea that a small handful of them were about to become numismatic legends. Here is where the story gets interesting. During the striking process, coins are pressed between 2 dies, one for the front, one for the back, under immense pressure, again and again, thousands of times a minute, all day long. It is an industrial process built for speed and precision. But precision machines, even the best ones, are not perfect. And in 1997, at least one working die at the Philadelphia Mint developed a flaw that would change everything. Numismatists call it a double die obverse, or DDO, for short. Here is what that means, in plain language. When the die itself, the metal stamp used to imprint the design onto the coin, is created, it goes through a hubbing process, where the design is pressed into the die multiple times to harden the image. If the die shifts even slightly between these hubbing stages, the result is a die with a doubled image baked directly into it. Every single coin struck by that flawed die will carry the same doubling permanently. On the 1997 quarter, collectors discovered doubling most visible in the lettering of Liberty and in the date itself, with a ghostly secondary outline shadowing the primary design. Under low magnification, you can actually see the numbers in the date looking almost like they are vibrating, doubled ever so slightly, as if the coin is trying to show you 2 versions of itself at once. It is subtle. It is easy to miss. Which is exactly why so many of these coins slipped through unnoticed for years. But that is not the only anomaly collectors have found on rare 1997 P specimens. A smaller, even more dramatic group of these quarters left the mint with what is known as a clipped planchet error. Before a coin is struck, a blank metal disc, called a planchet, is punched out of a long sheet of metal. If that sheet feeds through the punching machine incorrectly, overlapping, when that clipped blank gets stamped with the Washington quarter design anyway, the mint doesn't catch it, and it slides right into a coin bag headed for general circulation. The result is a coin that is visibly, undeniably different from every other quarter in your pocket, a strange, moon-shaped notch cut right out of the edge, design and all. Collectors go wild for clipped planchet errors, because they are instantly recognizable, dramatic to look at, and relatively uncommon in high grade. And then there is a third type of error tied to certain 1997 P quarters, a BROADSTRIKE. Without that collar holding everything in place, the coin spreads out wider and flatter than it should, the design pushed slightly outward, the edges losing their crisp, reeded texture. A broad-struck 1997 P quarter looks almost like it was stepped on, wider, thinner, strange, and yet the design is still fully readable, which is exactly why collectors prize it. It is proof, frozen in metal, of a machine malfunctioning in real time. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does a coin like this even end up in someone's pocket? Shouldn't the mint catch these mistakes before they leave the building? And the answer is, they try to. Quality control at the U.S. Mint is genuinely rigorous. Inspectors sample bags of coins, visually checking for obvious defects. But when you are producing hundreds of millions of coins a year, running dies until they are visibly worn down, and moving product at industrial speed, some errors are simply going to slip past even the best inspection process. A handful of bags escape scrutiny. A few rolls get sent out unflagged. And just like that, an error coin worth thousands of dollars ends up sitting in a cash register in Ohio, or a coin-op laundromat in Texas, or a church collection plate in Georgia, completely unnoticed, spent and respent by people who have absolutely no idea what they are holding. This is the part of the story that I find most incredible. Because somewhere, at some point, a real person held one of these coins in their hand. Maybe they got it as change from a gas station. Maybe it was buried in a jar of coins their grandmother left behind. Maybe it had been sitting in an old piggy bank since the late 90s, untouched, waiting. And when that person finally decided to sit down and actually look at their old coins, really look, under good lighting, maybe with a magnifying glass, they noticed something strange about the date. That subtle doubling. That strange shadow around the letters. And their hearts started racing. This is exactly the kind of discovery story that collectors live for: the sock drawer find, the grandma's coin jar find, the moment when an ordinary object turns out to be extraordinary. There have been documented cases of everyday people submitting old family coin collections to grading services, almost as an afterthought, only to discover a 1997 P error quarter mixed in among a pile of otherwise worthless change. One story that circulates in numismatic forums involves a woman cleaning out her late father's workshop, finding a Folgers coffee can stuffed with loose change under his workbench. Most of it was ordinary worn Lincoln cents, common dimes, nothing special. But buried near the bottom was a 1997 P quarter with an unmistakable double date. She almost didn't bother getting it checked. She almost rolled it up with the rest and took it to the bank. Imagine that. Imagine coming within inches of depositing a coin worth thousands of dollars for its 25-cent face value. That is the terrifying, thrilling reality of error coins. Most of them are destroyed, spent, or melted down by people who simply do not know what they are looking at. Which is exactly why we make videos like this one. Now let's talk about what actually happens once a coin like this gets discovered. The very first step any serious collector takes is submitting the coin to a professional grading service, most commonly PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, or in GC, the Numismatic Guarantee Company. These two organizations are the gold standard of coin authentication in the United States. When you submit a coin, expert graders examine it under magnification, verify that the error is genuine, not just damage from being dropped or scratched, and then assign it an official grade on what is called the Sheldon scale. This scale runs from 1, representing a coin so worn you can barely make out the design, all the way up to 70, representing an absolutely perfect coin with no imperfections whatsoever, even under intense magnification. For circulated coins found in pocket change, grades in the MS60 to MS65 range, MS standing for mint state, are considered solid, collector-worthy examples. But it is the coins that grade MS67, MS68, or higher that truly command jaw-dropping prices at auction. Once graded, the coin is sealed inside a tamper-proof holder, often called a slab, with the grade, the error type, and a unique certification number printed right on the label. This is what gives buyers confidence. A PCGS or NGC label essentially says, "This is not a scratch, this is not a fake, this is a genuine, verified minting error." For exceptional specimens, PCGS also offers something called TrueView photography, ultra-high-resolution imaging that captures every detail of the coin's surface, luster, and error characteristics in stunning clarity, often used in online auction listings to showcase a coin's quality to serious bidders around the world. Collectors who are building complete sets also enter their coins into the PCGS set registry or the NGC registry, competitive registries where collectors compete to build the finest possible set of a given coin type, competing for what is called top pop status, meaning their coin is tied for the highest surviving grade known for that specific date, mint, and error combination. For a coin like the 1997 P quarter with a verified double die error, being top pop can single-handedly multiply its value several times over compared to a lower graded example. Population reports, publicly available data showing exactly how many coins of a given grade have been certified, are poured over obsessively by serious collectors, because scarcity at the top of the grading scale is what truly drives extreme prices. A coin might have millions of common surviving examples in circulated grades, but only a tiny handful, sometimes fewer than 10, certified at MS67 or above with the double die error confirmed. That kind of extreme scarcity, combined with strong collector demand, is exactly the formula that pushed a specific 1997 P quarter to that incredible $19,000 sale. Now, let's talk about auction history, because this is where theory turns into cold, hard proof. Error coin auctions have exploded in popularity over the last 2 decades, driven largely by online platforms, dedicated coin auction houses, and a new generation of collectors who discovered rare coins not through dusty coin shops, but through YouTube videos exactly like this one. Heritage Auctions, one of the largest rare coin auction houses in the world, along with specialized error coin dealers and online marketplaces, have all seen dramatic price increases for verified mint errors on modern quarters, coins that, just 20 years ago, most people assumed were basically worthless because they were too new to be valuable. That assumption could not be more wrong. Age has almost nothing to do with a coin's value. Rarity does. And a double die, clipped planchet, or broadstrike 1997 P quarter, especially in high mint state grade, is exponentially rarer than plenty of coins twice its age. This is exactly the mindset shift that separates casual coin owners from serious collectors, the realization that the coin sitting in your pocket, right now, today, might be hiding the exact same kind of once-in-a-lifetime error. So think about it. How many quarters have passed through your hands over the years? Hundreds? Thousands? How many of them did you actually stop and examine closely? Probably none. And that is precisely the gap in awareness that allows coins like this 1997 P quarter to remain hidden in plain sight for decades, passed from hand to hand, register to register, completely unnoticed. Until one day, someone finally stops. Someone finally looks. And their entire financial situation changes in an instant. Before we move forward, I want you to imagine holding that exact coin in your hand right now. Picture the weight of it. the cool metal against your palm. The subtle doubling in the date, catching the light just right as you tilt it back and forth. Knowing that this small, unassuming disc of metal, something you could have easily spent on a candy bar, is instead worth enough to make a serious dent in a car payment, a semester of tuition, or even a down payment on a home. That is the power of error coins. That is why collectors across the country are constantly checking their change, rolling through bank boxes of quarters, and scouring old collections handed down from parents and grandparents. Because you never know. The next coin you pick up could be the one. And speaking of the next coin, we are just getting started today. Because if you thought this 1997 P quarter was unbelievable, the next coin on our list is even more unbelievable. I am not going to reveal its value yet, you are going to have to stick around for that. But I will tell you this much, it comes from a completely different mint, carries an entirely different kind of error, and its story involves a discovery so unexpected that even seasoned collectors were shocked when it came to light. After that, we still have 3 more coins waiting. Each one climbing higher. Each one stranger, rarer, and more valuable than the last. By the time we reach our final coin today, you are going to understand exactly why people spend their weekends sorting through rolls of quarters from the bank, one by one, hunting for exactly this kind of hidden treasure. So do not go anywhere. Keep this video playing. Because the story of the 1997 P quarter dollar was just the beginning. The real shock is still coming. Next, 1992 D quarter dollar. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. If you thought the last quarter we talked about was rare, take a breath, because this next one takes things to a whole new level. We are moving now from Philadelphia over to Denver, and from 1997 back to 1992, a year that, on the surface, seems just as unremarkable as any other for American coinage. Billions of quarters were struck across the country that year, feeding the everyday economy without a second thought from anyone. But hidden among those billions, a tiny handful of 1992 D quarters left the Denver Mint carrying secrets that would eventually make them worth a life-changing sum of money. Today, one of those coins, a single 1992 D quarter, verified and certified, sold for an astonishing $23,000. Read that again. $23,000. For a coin that, at face value, is worth exactly 25 cents. That means this coin sold for over 92,000 times its printed value. Think about that math for a second. If your rent or your car payment multiplied by that same number, you would be talking about sums that sound almost fictional. And yet here we are, talking about real money, paid by real collectors, for a real coin that could, right now, be sitting in a jar in somebody's closet. Now remember, we still have 3 more coins to cover after this one, and I promise you, the numbers only continue to climb from here. I am not going to spoil what is coming. But I will say this, the coin waiting for you after this one carries an error so visually dramatic that collectors sometimes gasp the first time they see it in person. So stay with me. Because the story of the 1992 D quarter is about to show you exactly how a coin can hide in plain sight for decades before anyone realizes what it truly is. Let's rewind to 1992 for a moment, and set the scene. The Denver Mint, marked with that small d mint mark, has always been one of the workhorses of American coin production, churning out hundreds of millions of coins every single year, right alongside its sister facility in Philadelphia. In 1992, the Denver Mint was producing Washington quarters at a relentless pace, feeding banks, businesses, and vending machines across the entire western half of the country. At that point in history, the Washington quarter design had remained essentially frozen in time since 1932. Washington's dignified profile on the front, the eagle with wings outstretched on the back. It was a design so familiar that literally nobody stopped to examine it closely. Coins were treated as background noise, something you used without thinking, something you dumped into a jar without a second glance. But inside the Denver Mint's production line that year, something unusual was happening with the equipment used to stamp mint marks onto working dies. Here is where our first error type comes into play, something numismatists call an RPM, or repunched mint mark. Back in this era of coin production, mint marks were not part of the original master die. Instead, individual working dies were punched by hand, or by a hand-operated machine, with a small letter, in this case, the letter D, to indicate the Denver Mint. If that punch shifted even slightly between strikes, tilted at an angle, punched too high, then repositioned and punched again, the result is a die that leaves two overlapping mint mark impressions on every single coin it strikes. On certain 1992 D quarters, collectors have identified a dramatic repunched mint mark, where the D appears doubled, shifted noticeably to one side, almost like a ghost image trailing behind the primary mint mark. Under magnification, it looks as though the coin is trying to show you two Denver Mint marks fused together, proof, frozen forever in metal, of a human hand adjusting a punch back in 1992, never imagining that decades later, people would be paying thousands of dollars to own the result of that tiny correction. But the repunched mint mark is not the only anomaly tied to certain rare 1992 D quarters. A smaller, even more visually shocking group of these coins left the mint with what is called an OFF center strike. This happens when a coin blank fails to feed correctly into the striking chamber, landing slightly askew between the dies at the moment of impact. Instead of the design stamping perfectly centered on the coin, it gets pressed off to one side, leaving a crescent of blank, unstruck metal along one edge, while the opposite side shows the full, crisp Washington quarter design. Off-center strikes are graded and described by percentage. A coin struck 5% off-center still looks mostly normal, but a coin struck 20, 30, even 40% off-center looks almost alien, with Washington's profile shoved dramatically to one side, a smooth blank crescent taking up the rest of the coin. These are among the most eye-catching, wow factor errors in the entire hobby, because you do not need a magnifying glass or a trained eye to see that something is deeply wrong with the coin. It is immediately, viscerally obvious, even to someone who has never collected a single coin in their life. And then there is a third anomaly discovered on a small number of surviving 1992 D specimens, a lamination flaw. This occurs when impurities, trapped gas, or foreign material get mixed into the metal strip during the manufacturing process, creating a weakness within the metal itself. When that flawed strip is struck into a coin, thin layers of metal can peel, flake, or crack away from the surface, sometimes during the striking process itself, sometimes months or years later, as the coin ages and the internal stress in the metal continues to work itself loose. A 1992 D quarter with a dramatic lamination flaw might show a jagged, flaking patch across Washington's cheek, or a hairline crack running through the eagle's wing on the reverse, a visible scar left behind by a manufacturing defect baked into the raw metal itself before the coin was ever struck. Now, here is something fascinating about lamination errors specifically, because the flaw originates in the metal strip itself, rather than in the dies. No two lamination error coins look exactly alike. Each one is a completely unique, one-of-a-kind flaw pattern, which makes them especially fascinating to serious error collectors who want something that no other collector in the world can possess in an identical form. So how does a coin like this actually make its way from a mint production line into somebody's spare change? The answer, again, comes down to the sheer scale of American coin production. The Denver Mint in 1992 was producing quarters by the hundreds of millions, running dies for extended periods, feeding blanks through high-speed machinery at a pace that makes human quality control an imperfect science. Inspectors do their best. Sample bags get checked. Obviously damaged coins get pulled. But subtle errors, a slightly doubled mint mark, a coin that landed a few degrees off-center, a lamination crack that had not yet fully revealed itself, these things slip through, again and again, year after year, mint after mint. A handful of bags escape careful scrutiny. A few rolls get shipped out the door without a second look. And just like that, thousands of dollars worth of error coins enter general circulation completely unnoticed,
destined to be spent, respent, and forgotten, sometimes for decades, before anyone realizes what they are holding.
This is exactly what makes coin collecting and coin hunting so thrilling. Because somewhere out there, right now, in a bank bag of quarters, in an old coin jar, in a forgotten piggy bank in someone's attic, one of these 1992 error quarters might be sitting quietly, waiting to be discovered. There is a story that circulates among error coin collectors about a retired mail carrier in the Midwest who spent years rolling coins from his daily change into paper wrappers, just as a small hobby to pass the time in retirement. One evening, while rolling a batch of quarters pulled from a bank box, he noticed one coin that felt slightly different in his hand, a strange weight, an odd visual imbalance when he held it up to the light. At first, he assumed it was simply damaged, maybe run over by a car or chewed up by a vending machine at some point in its life. He almost tossed it back into the bank bag without a second thought. But something made him pause. He set it aside, did a little research online that night, and slowly began to realize what he might actually be holding, a dramatically off-center 1992 quarter, exactly the kind of error that collectors search for their entire lives without ever finding one. He submitted it for grading soon after. And when the results came back, confirming the error and assigning it a strong mint state grade, his quiet retirement hobby turned into a payday he never could have imagined. Stories like this are not rare in the coin collecting community, they happen more often than most people realize, precisely because so few people take the time to actually examine their coins closely. Now let's talk about what happens once a coin like this gets identified, because the process from interesting find to verified treasure is critical to understanding its true value. Just like with our previous coin, the discovery process almost always leads to PCGS or NGC, the two most trusted grading and authentication services in the country. Expert graders examine the coin under strong magnification, comparing it against known genuine examples of the specific error type, ruling out post-mint damage, and confirming that what they are looking at is truly a mint-made anomaly, not something that happened after the coin left the factory. This distinction matters enormously, because a coin that was damaged after minting, dropped, run over, chewed by a machine, has essentially no additional collector value. But a coin with a genuine, mint-made error is a completely different story, because it represents an authentic, unrepeatable moment of mechanical failure captured forever in solid metal. Once verified, the coin receives an official grade on the Sheldon scale, that same 1 to 70-point system used across the entire hobby, where a worn, heavily circulated coin might grade in the 20s or 30s, while a pristine, uncirculated example can reach into the mint state 60s and beyond. For a 1992 quarter with a dramatic, visually striking error like an off-center strike or a bold repunched mint mark, even a moderate mint state grade can command serious money, precisely because so few examples have survived in that condition. High-grade examples, MS66, MS67, and above, become the true prizes of the category, sometimes commanding prices many multiples higher than a lower-graded example of the exact same error type. Collectors chasing these top-tier coins compete fiercely within the PCGS set registry and the NGC registry, building specialized error coin sets and competing for top pop status recognition as the finest known surviving example of a specific coin, mint mark, and error combination. Population reports published by both grading services allow collectors and dealers alike to see, in real time, exactly how many examples of a given coin have been certified at each grade level, and this scarcity data is often the single biggest driver of extreme auction prices. For a coin like this particular 1992 quarter, population data reportedly shows fewer than a dozen certified examples at the very top of the grading scale, with this specific error confirmed, a level of scarcity that helps explain exactly why a single coin was able to command the jaw-dropping $23,000 sale. Auction houses specializing in error coins, along with major platforms like Heritage Auctions, have documented a clear, sustained rise in interest and pricing for modern-era mint errors over the past 2 decades. This shift reflects a broader change in the collecting world, a new generation of collectors, many of them introduced to the hobby through videos exactly like this one, who understand that rarity, not age, is what ultimately drives a coin's value. A 1992 D quarter, struck less than 4 decades ago, can be exponentially rarer in verified error condition than coins that are 100 years older, simply because so few error examples of any given type survive intact, undamaged, and undiscovered. Think about your own collection of loose change for a moment. How many quarters have passed through your hands since you were a child? How many of them did you actually take the time to really examine, tilting them under a bright light, checking the mint mark, checking the strike, checking the surfaces for anything unusual? Almost certainly, the answer is close to zero. And that gap, that universal lack of attention, is exactly why coins like this 1992 D quarter remain hidden in plain sight for so long, passed from register to pocket to jar, over and over, completely unnoticed by everyone who touches them. Until, one day, somebody finally stops. Somebody finally looks closely. And an entire financial future shifts in an instant. Picture it for a moment, holding that exact coin in your palm, feeling the subtle imbalance of an off-center strike, watching the light catch a repunched mint mark you never would have noticed without knowing exactly what to look for. Knowing that this small, unassuming piece of metal, something you might have handed over for a bag of chips without thinking twice, could instead be worth enough to cover months of expenses, or fund a dream vacation, or simply sit as a stunning centerpiece in a growing collection. That is the reality of error coin hunting. And it is exactly why serious collectors continue rolling through bank boxes, sorting coin jars, and examining every quarter that passes through their hands. Because you truly never know. And speaking of never knowing, we are only halfway through today's list. If you thought this 1992 D quarter was shocking, brace yourself, because the next coin takes things even further. I am still not going to reveal its value. You are going to have to keep watching for that. But I will tell you this much, the next coin comes from a mint we have not mentioned yet today, carries a visual error unlike anything we have discussed so far, and its discovery story involves a moment so unexpected that it left even experienced collectors speechless. After that coin, we still have 2 more waiting, each one bigger, rarer, and more astonishing than the last. So do not stop watching now. Because the story of the 1992 D quarter dollar was only the second chapter. The real shock is still building. Next, 1986 D quarter dollar. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. We have already talked about a doubled die from Philadelphia, and a dramatic off-center strike from Denver. But this next coin takes the story somewhere completely different, into the world of coins that were never even supposed to exist in the form they took. We are traveling back now to 1986, once again to the Denver Mint, where a small handful of quarters left the building carrying mistakes so severe, so visually strange, that when they eventually surfaced decades later, even veteran dealers had to do a double take. One of those coins, a single 1986 D quarter, fully authenticated and certified, sold at auction for an incredible $31,000. $31,000. For a coin that was handed out as 25 cents and change, probably somewhere in the late 1980s, to someone who had absolutely no idea what they were holding. We are now well past 100,000 times face value. And we still have 2 more coins left to go after this one, including a grand finale that is going to leave you speechless. I promise you that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because the story of this 1986 D quarter, and exactly how it ended up worth more than most people's monthly paycheck, is one of the strangest tales in this entire video. Let's set the stage. 1986 was, by most measures, an unremarkable year in the history of American coinage. The Washington quarter design had remained frozen since 1932, and the Denver Mint was pumping out hundreds of millions of quarters that year alongside its usual production of dimes, nickels, and pennies. Coin production in the mid-1980s ran at an absolutely relentless industrial pace, with massive coining presses striking coins by the thousands per minute, dies wearing down and being replaced constantly, and quality control inspectors doing their best to catch problems in a system moving faster than any human eye could fully monitor. It was within this high-speed, high-volume environment that a small number of 1986 decoders left the mint carrying errors that should never have made it past inspection, but did. Let's start with the most dramatic of these anomalies, something numismatists call a CUD. A cut occurs when a piece of the coin die itself breaks away, usually along the rim, due to metal fatigue after being slammed together with tremendous force millions and millions of times. Once a chunk of the die breaks off, that missing section leaves a raised, blank, featureless blob of metal on every coin struck afterward by that damaged die, a strange, smooth lump rising up from the coin's surface, right where crisp lettering or design detail should be. On certain surviving 1986 decoders, collectors have documented a bold cut error along the rim near the date, a raised blob of blank metal that looks almost like a bubble frozen mid-pop, completely disrupting the otherwise normal Washington quarter design. CUDs are priced specifically because they represent visible, undeniable proof of a die literally breaking apart in real time during production, a piece of mechanical history captured forever in a 25-cent coin. But the cut error is not even the strangest anomaly tied to rare surviving 1986 D specimens. A smaller, far more unusual group of these coins were struck on what is called a wrong planchet. This is exactly what it sounds like. A coin blank intended for an entirely different denomination somehow gets fed into the wrong coining press, and the Washington quarter design gets stamped directly onto it anyway. In the case of certain rare 1986 D error coins, evidence suggests some quarters were struck on planchets originally intended for dime production, smaller, thinner blanks that were never meant to receive the quarter dies at all. The result is a coin that looks unmistakably wrong the moment you pick it up, undersized, oddly weighted, with the full Washington quarter design crammed awkwardly onto a blank that is simply too small to properly contain it, parts of the design running right off the edge of the coin, cut off mid-image. Wrong planchet errors are considered among the rarest and most valuable categories in the entire error coin hobby, because they require an extraordinarily specific, almost impossible sequence of mechanical failures to occur. The wrong blank has to physically end up in the wrong feeding mechanism, survive the striking process without being caught, and then somehow slip past inspection and out into general circulation. The odds of that exact chain of events happening are almost unbelievably small, which is exactly why wrong planchet quarters can command prices far beyond almost any other error category. And then, on top of the cut and the wrong planchet anomalies, a third type of error has been documented on select surviving 1986 D quarters, a strike-through error. This occurs when a foreign object, a stray piece of grease, a scrap of cloth, a fragment of another coin, even a loose piece of wire from the machinery itself, ends up trapped between the die and the blank at the exact moment of striking. Whatever that object was gets pressed, quite literally, into the surface of the coin, leaving a strange, textured impression where the normal design should be, sometimes a smooth void, sometimes a bizarre fabric-like texture, sometimes even a fragment of another coin's design ghosted onto the surface in a phenomenon collectors call a brockage-style strike-through. Every strike-through error is completely unique, since the foreign object involved is different every single time, making each surviving example a genuinely one-of-a-kind artifact frozen in metal. Now, here is a question worth pausing on: how does the mint's quality control system possibly miss errors this dramatic? A wrong planchet quarter looks obviously abnormal. A cut error is a visible lump of extra metal. A strike-through leaves a bizarre texture right on the coin's surface. Shouldn't these be easy to catch? The uncomfortable truth is this: in the 1980s, coin production ran at such an overwhelming industrial scale that visual inspection was, by necessity, based on random sampling rather than examining every single coin individually. Inspectors would pull representative samples from massive bins containing hundreds of thousands of coins, checking for obvious, widespread problems, but with production numbers in the hundreds of millions per year, it was mathematically impossible to catch every single anomaly. A handful of error coins per million struck could easily slip through a sampling-based inspection system, get bagged with otherwise normal coins, and shipped out to banks across the entire country without anyone ever noticing. From there, these coins entered the same circulation stream as billions of completely ordinary quarters, passed from bank to business to consumer, spent and re-spent, sitting in registers, piggy banks, and coin jars for years, sometimes decades, before anyone with the right knowledge finally laid eyes on one. There is a particularly memorable story that circulates within error coin collecting circles about a young man who inherited a large jar of loose change from his grandfather, a man who had worked for decades as a bus driver and had apparently saved every unusual-looking coin he ever received in fair payments, tossing them into a separate jar without ever really knowing why. Years after his grandfather passed, the young man finally sat down to sort through that jar, more out of curiosity and sentimentality than any expectation of finding something valuable. Most of the coins were simply worn, ordinary pieces, nothing special, nothing that stood out. But near the bottom of the jar, he found a strange, undersized quarter that looked almost wrong somehow, the design slightly cut off at the edge, the coin noticeably thinner and lighter than a normal quarter should feel. At first he assumed it was some kind of foreign coin, or a novelty token, and nearly set it aside without a second thought. But something about it nagged at him. He photographed it, posted it in an online coin collecting forum late one night, and within hours, experienced collectors were flooding his inbox, explaining exactly what he might be holding: a genuine wrong planchet error, exactly the kind of coin his grandfather, without ever fully understanding the mint's inner workings, had apparently sensed was somehow different enough to be worth saving in that separate jar for all those years. That instinct, passed down without explanation, preserved out of pure curiosity, turned into a genuine numismatic treasure, verified, graded, and eventually sold for a sum that would have astonished his grandfather far more than it astonished him. Stories like this remind us that error coins are not just abstract collector curiosities, they are physical connections to the people who once held them, saved them, and passed them down, often without ever fully understanding what they had. Now, let's talk about the process of verifying and grading a coin like this, because with an error this dramatic, authentication becomes even more critical than usual. PCGS and NGC both maintain specialized expertise specifically for wrong planchet and major error coins, employing graders who have handled thousands of genuine error specimens and who can immediately distinguish authentic mint errors from post-mint damage or, in rarer cases, deliberate alteration. For a coin like a wrong planchet 1986 D quarter, the authentication process typically involves careful weight measurement, since coins struck on the wrong planchet will have a different weight than a properly struck example, along with detailed surface examination under magnification to confirm that design elements are genuinely cut off due to an undersized blank, rather than damaged after the fact. Once authenticated, the coin receives an official grade on the familiar Sheldon scale, that same 1 to 70 point system used throughout the entire hobby, with dramatic error coins often achieving strong grades simply because the nature of the error means these coins frequently went straight from the mint into someone's possession without ever circulating extensively. For truly exceptional examples, coins combining a rare error type with an unusually high mint state grade, designations like PCGS's Secure Plus or NGC's Star designation can be applied, indicating exceptional eye appeal or surface quality beyond what the base numerical grade alone conveys. Collectors chasing coins in this category actively track population reports from both grading services, watching for updates as new examples occasionally surface, understanding that scarcity data at the very top of the grading scale is often the single strongest predictor of eventual auction performance. For the specific error types found on rare surviving 1986 D quarters, population numbers reportedly remain in the single digits for the most dramatic combinations. A wrong planchet strike, for instance, combined with clear evidence of a strike-through error, representing a level of rarity that very few other coin categories can match. This extreme scarcity is precisely why auction results for coins like this one have climbed so dramatically over the past 2 decades, as more and more collectors enter the hobby, competing for an ever-shrinking pool of verified, high-grade error examples. Major auction houses specializing in error and variety coins have documented consistent, sustained demand for wrong planchet errors specifically, often citing them as among the most requested and most competitively bid categories at major coin shows and online auctions alike. Think, for a moment, about what this means for you, sitting at home, with access to rolls of quarters from your local bank, or coin jars inherited from family members, or simply loose change collected over years of everyday transactions. Every single one of those coins represents a tiny lottery ticket, a chance encounter with the exact kind of mechanical failure that transformed an ordinary 1986 D quarter into a $31,000 treasure. Most people will never take the time to check. Most people will spend their quarters without a second thought, exactly as they have their entire lives. But the people who do take the time, who sort through their change carefully, who examine dates and mint marks and surfaces under good lighting, those are the people who occasionally find something that changes everything. And we are not done yet. Because if you thought this 1986 D quarter, with its cud, its wrong planchet, and its bizarre strike-through error, was shocking, the next coin on our list takes things to an entirely new level. I am still not going to tell you its value. You are going to have to keep watching to find out. But I will say this, the next coin's discovery story involves a moment of pure disbelief from the person who found it, a moment so unexpected that they reportedly sat in stunned silence for several minutes before they could even process what they were looking at. After that coin, we still have one more waiting, the grand finale of today's video, the single most valuable coin on our entire list. So stay with me. Because the story of the 1986 D quarter dollar was only the third chapter of an incredible journey. Next, 1984 D quarter dollar. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives. We have covered a doubled die from Philadelphia, an off-center strike from Denver, and a wrong planchet error so rare that even experts were stunned. But this next coin, ladies and gentlemen, might be the strangest one yet. Because this coin was not just struck incorrectly, it was struck twice, in two completely different ways, by two different pieces of metal, in an event so mechanically unlikely that most mint employees who worked the coining floor their entire careers never once witnessed it happen. We are traveling now to 1984, back to the Denver Mint once again, where a tiny handful of quarters left the building carrying one of the rarest categories of error in the entire hobby. One of those coins, a single 1984 D quarter, fully authenticated by a major grading service, sold at public auction for a jaw-dropping $48,000. $48,000. For a coin that was, at some point in the mid-1980s, handed to somebody as ordinary pocket change, probably as part of a stack of coins from a cash register, with absolutely no fanfare, no announcement, nothing to indicate that it was anything other than an unremarkable quarter. We are now approaching nearly 200,000 times face value. And we still have one more coin left after this, the grand finale of today's video, the single highest value coin on our entire list. I am not going to reveal a single detail about it yet. But I will tell you this much: after you hear that final coin story, you are going to want to go check every jar, every drawer, and every old collection in your house immediately. For now, though, let's dig into exactly what made this 1984 D quarter so extraordinarily rare. Let's start with the history. 1984 was a year defined by relentless coin production at the Denver Mint, with the facility running its coining presses around the clock to keep up with the demands of an economy that relied heavily on physical cash and coin for everyday transactions. Vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, toll booths, quarters were the workhorse denomination of American commerce, and the Mint had to produce them by the hundreds of millions every single year just to keep pace. Within that relentless, high-speed production environment, a mechanical malfunction occurred that would create one of the rarest error categories in all of numismatics, something called a blockage error. Here is how a blockage happens, and it is genuinely one of the strangest sequences of events in the entire minting process. Normally, after a coin is struck, it is immediately ejected from the coining chamber to make room for the next blank. But every so often, due to a mechanical hiccup, a freshly struck coin fails to eject properly and instead sticks to the surface of one of the dies. When the next blank feeds into the chamber, it gets struck not against the smooth, engraved surface of the die, but against the back of that stuck coin instead. The result is bizarre and unmistakable. The new coin receives a mirror image, incus impression of the previous coin's design, rather than a normal, properly struck image. On the rare surviving 1984 D Brockage error quarters, one side of the coin shows a completely normal, crisp Washington quarter design, while the opposite side shows an eerie, ghostly, backwards mirror image of that same design, sunken into the metal instead of raised, as if two coins had somehow merged into one impossible object. Brockage errors are considered among the true holy grail categories for error coin collectors, precisely because the sequence of mechanical failures required to create one is almost unbelievably specific. A coin has to fail to eject, remain perfectly positioned on the die face, and then a new blank has to feed in and get struck against it, all before Mint employees notice the malfunction and stop the press. But the Brockage error is not the only anomaly tied to certain rare surviving 1984 D specimens. A second, equally dramatic category has also been documented, something called a die cap. A die cap occurs when a struck coin becomes stuck to the die, but instead of simply leaving a Brockage impression on the next coin, the stuck coin actually stays attached to the die through multiple striking cycles, gradually being pounded thinner and thinner, stretching and curling up around the edges of the die like a small metal cup or thimble, with each subsequent strike further deforming its shape. Eventually, the die cap either falls off the die entirely, revealing a coin that looks almost like a bottle cap, thin, curved, deeply distorted, with a bizarre cup shape completely unlike any normal coin, or it continues striking additional blanks, creating a whole chain of related errors before Mint workers finally catch the malfunction and shut down the press. Surviving die cap examples from 1984 D are almost unbelievably scarce, since most caps were caught relatively quickly by Mint personnel, meaning any example that actually escaped into circulation represents an extraordinarily narrow window of mechanical failure. And then, layered on top of these two extraordinary anomalies, a third type of error has also been confirmed on select 1984 D quarters, a rotated die error. Under normal circumstances, when you flip a properly struck coin over from front to back, the design on the reverse should be oriented perfectly upright relative to the obverse, a standard called coin turn alignment that has been used in American coinage for generations. But if a die becomes loose within its mounting during production, gradually rotating out of its correct alignment, every coin struck afterward will show the reverse design rotated at some angle relative to the front, sometimes a subtle few degrees, sometimes a dramatic 90 degrees, and in the most extreme documented cases, a full 180 degrees, meaning the eagle on the back appears completely upside down relative to Washington's portrait on the front. Rotated die errors are measured and catalogued by degree of rotation, with more extreme rotations generally commanding significantly higher premiums among specialized collectors who focus specifically on this error category. Now, you might reasonably be asking, how does a Mint facility, staffed by trained professionals, running quality control checks throughout the day, possibly allow errors this dramatic and this obvious to slip through undetected? The honest answer lies in the sheer relentless speed of industrial coin production. A single coining press in the 1980s could strike well over 100 coins per minute, meaning a malfunction that persists for even a few seconds before being caught could produce dozens of dramatically flawed coins before anyone notices. Mint employees monitoring the coining floor are watching multiple presses simultaneously, listening for unusual sounds, watching for visible jams, but a malfunction that produces coins which still look roughly normal from a distance, like a rotated die error, which requires physically flipping the coin over to notice, can easily continue for a brief window before detection. And once a small batch of these error coins enters a bag destined for a bank, they become essentially indistinguishable from ordinary quarters until someone takes the time to examine them individually. There is a compelling story that circulates among serious error coin collectors about a coin shop owner in the Midwest who received a bulk bag of assorted quarters from a regular customer looking to sell off years of accumulated pocket change. Rather than simply weighing the bag and offering a bulk price, as many shops would do, this particular owner had a habit of quickly running his thumb across every coin, feeling for anything unusual before sorting them into rolls. Midway through the bag, his thumb caught on something strange, a coin that felt distinctly thinner, almost delicate, compared to every other quarter around it. He set it aside, assuming at first it might simply be a foreign coin that had slipped into American circulation, something that happens more often than people realize. But under his loupe, he immediately recognized something far more significant: the telltale cupped, curved shape of a die cap error, one of the rarest anomalies he had encountered in over 20 years in the business. He contacted the original customer, explained what he had found, and the two of them ultimately split the proceeds when the coin was later authenticated and sold at auction, turning an unremarkable bag of pocket change into a payday neither of them had ever anticipated. This story illustrates something important about error coins in this rarity tier. Sometimes it takes a trained, experienced eye to catch what an untrained observer would completely overlook, which is exactly why so many of these coins remained hidden in plain circulation for years before finally being identified. Now let's talk about verification and grading, because coins in this category require an especially rigorous authentication process. Blockage errors, die caps, and rotated dies are all, unfortunately, categories that have occasionally attracted counterfeiters and coin alterers looking to profit from unsuspecting buyers, which makes third-party certification through PCGS or NGC absolutely essential for any serious transaction. Expert graders examine these coins under significant magnification, checking for the specific, consistent characteristics that distinguish a genuine mint-made blockage or die cap from a coin that has simply been damaged, altered, or deliberately deformed after leaving the mint. For a die cap specifically, graders examine the metal flow patterns, the thinning gradient across the coin's surface, and the specific curvature characteristics that can only result from genuine, repeated striking against a die, rather than manual bending or reshaping. Once authenticated, these coins receive an official Sheldon scale grade, though for the most dramatic error types, grading services sometimes apply special designations noting the specific error category directly on the certification label, since the error itself, rather than the traditional where-based grade, is often the primary driver of the coin's value. Collectors specializing in this category track PCGS and NGC population reports closely, and for combined multi-error coins, a rotated die combined with evidence of a blockage strike, for instance, population numbers can be counted on one hand across the entire known collector universe. This level of scarcity is precisely why prices for coins in this category have continued climbing at auction houses specializing in mint errors, with dedicated error coin conventions and specialty auctions increasingly seeing bidding wars break out over confirmed examples. Think about the implications of this for a moment. A blockage error, a die cap, or a rotated die is not something you can identify with a quick glance at the date on a coin. You genuinely have to pick up every quarter, examine both sides carefully, check the alignment of the design, and feel for anything unusual in the weight or shape. Most people never do this. Most people treat their pocket change as background noise, exactly as they always have. But the people who take the time, who actually stop, look, and examine, occasionally find something that fundamentally changes their financial situation overnight. And now, we have arrived at the moment you have been waiting for. Because everything we have discussed today, the doubled die, the off-center strike, the wrong planchet, and this incredible blockage and die cap story, all of it has been building toward one final coin. The grand finale. The single most valuable, most shocking coin on our entire list today. I am not going to give you a single hint about what makes it so extraordinary. You are simply going to have to see it for yourself. But I promise you this: after you hear the story of our final coin, you are going to look at your spare change completely differently for the rest of your life. Stay with me. Last 1974 quarter dollar. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. We have traveled through 1997, 1992, 1986, and 1984 today, uncovering doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchets, blockage errors, and die caps, each coin more shocking than the last. But everything we have covered so far has been building toward this exact moment. Because the final coin on our list today is not just rare. It is not just valuable. It is, without question, the single most extraordinary coin we have discussed in this entire video. We are traveling all the way back now to 1974, a full decade before our previous coin, into an era when Richard Nixon still occupied the White House, when gas cost less than 50 cents a gallon, and when the Washington quarter had already been circulating, virtually unchanged, for over 4 decades. Nobody in 1974 could have possibly imagined that a small handful of quarters struck that year would one day be worth more than most people's annual salary. And yet, that is exactly what happened. One single 1974 quarter, fully authenticated, graded, and sold at public auction, achieved a price that stunned even seasoned collectors, an almost unbelievable $65,000. $65,000 for a coin with a face value of 25 cents. That means this single coin sold for over 260,000 times its printed value. If your monthly paycheck multiplied by that same number, we would be talking about sums that sound almost impossible to comprehend. And yet here we are, at the end of our journey today, staring directly at proof that it happened. This is the grand finale. The coin that ties everything together. And by the time we finish telling you its story, you are going to understand exactly why serious collectors spend their weekends, their evenings, and sometimes years of their lives, searching through ordinary rolls of quarters, hoping to find something exactly like this. So let's begin. 1974 sits at a fascinating crossroads in American coinage history. The nation's coin production was running at full industrial capacity, striking hundreds of millions of quarters across both the Philadelphia and Denver mints to keep pace with an economy still deeply reliant on physical cash for nearly every transaction. Within that massive production run, a working die at one of the mints developed one of the most sought-after and dramatic flaws in the entire hobby, something numismatists call a doubled die reverse, or DDR. We touched briefly on doubled dies earlier in this video, but it is worth explaining exactly why a doubled die reverse is considered even rarer, and even more valuable, than a doubled obverse in many cases. Remember, doubling occurs during the die-making process itself, when the master design is hubbed onto a working die in multiple stages, and if the die shifts slightly between those hubbing stages, the doubling becomes a permanent part of every coin the die ever strikes. On the reverse of certain rare surviving 1974 quarters, collectors have documented dramatic, unmistakable doubling across the lettering of United States of America and quarter dollar, with the eagle's wing feathers on the reverse showing a strange, layered, almost three-dimensional quality under magnification, as if two nearly identical images of the same eagle were fused together, just slightly out of alignment. Doubled die reverse errors tend to be rarer than their obverse counterparts throughout numismatic history, simply because reverse dies statistically receive less scrutiny during the hubbing and inspection process, meaning fewer doubled reverse dies are caught and destroyed before entering production. But when a genuinely dramatic DDR does slip through, the resulting coins become instant, top-tier rarities within the hobby. But the doubled die reverse is not the only anomaly tied to this legendary coin. A second, equally remarkable error has been confirmed on select surviving examples, something called a multiple strike. This occurs when a struck coin fails to eject from the coining chamber properly, but rather than sticking to a die and creating a blockage impression on the next coin, as we discussed with our previous coin, the same coin instead remains in the chamber and gets struck again, and sometimes again after that, receiving 2, 3, or even more separate impressions layered directly on top of one another. Each additional strike further distorts the coin's design, often rotating slightly between impressions, creating a chaotic, almost abstract blend of overlapping images, fragments of Washington's profile merging with ghostly echoes of the eagle, lettering doubling and tripling into an almost unreadable jumble. Multiple strike errors are exceptionally rare precisely because they require a coin to remain trapped and misaligned within the coining chamber not just once, but repeatedly, surviving several full striking cycles before finally being ejected or before mint personnel notice the malfunction and halt the press. Surviving multiple strike 1974 quarters are counted among the rarest error coins from the entire decade, with only a small handful of confirmed examples known to exist in any collector's hands today. And layered on top of both the double die reverse and the multiple strike phenomenon, a third anomaly has also been documented on certain surviving specimens: a partial collar error, sometimes referred to by collectors as a railroad rim. Remember, the collar is the metal ring that holds a coin blank in place during striking, ensuring the edge comes out perfectly round with those familiar reeded ridges running along the rim. If that collar fails to fully engage, rising only partially into position during the strike, the coin ends up with one section of its edge properly reeded and round, while the opposite section spreads out wider and flatter, creating an oddly asymmetrical shape that, when viewed edge-on, resembles the wheels of an old railroad car. Hence the nickname collectors have given this dramatic and highly visual error. The combination of these three anomalies, a bold double die reverse, evidence of a genuine multiple strike, and a partial collar railroad rim occurring together on a single surviving 1974 quarter, is what elevates this particular coin from merely rare to truly legendary within the numismatic community. Coins combining multiple major error categories like this are sometimes referred to informally among collectors as error-trifectas, and they represent some of the single rarest, most valuable objects in the entire modern error coin hobby. Now, let's talk about how a coin carrying three separate, dramatic mint errors could possibly have slipped past quality control and entered general circulation back in 1974. The honest truth is that this exact combination represents an almost unbelievable cascade of mechanical failures happening in rapid succession: a die already flawed with doubling, feeding into a chamber where a coin failed to eject properly, receiving multiple overlapping strikes, all while the collar mechanism was simultaneously malfunctioning. Statistically speaking, the odds of all three of these failures occurring together, on the same coin, are almost impossibly small. And yet, somehow, it happened. And somehow, that coin made it past inspection, into a bag, onto a truck, into a bank, into a cash register, and eventually into someone's pocket, or it began circulating just like any other ordinary quarter. There is a truly remarkable story connected to how this specific coin was eventually discovered, one that has become something of a legend within error coin collecting circles. According to accounts shared by longtime collectors, the coin was found decades after it was minted, inside an old cigar box that had belonged to a woman's late husband, a man who had worked for years as a toll booth operator on a major interstate highway during the 1970s. Like many people in that profession, he had developed a habit over the years of setting aside any coin that looked even slightly unusual, tossing it into a small box he kept in his workshop, without ever fully investigating what he had actually found. After he passed away, the box sat untouched for years, eventually rediscovered during a home renovation project by his widow, who initially considered simply donating the old coins to a local charity collection drive. But a family member, aware of the growing popularity of coin collecting videos and error coin communities online, suggested having the collection examined by a professional before giving anything away. That decision changed everything. Buried among dozens of otherwise unremarkable coins was a strange, misshapen quarter, its edge irregular, its design a chaotic blur of overlapping images that immediately caught the eye of the appraiser examining the collection. What followed was months of careful authentication, cross-referencing against known die varieties, and ultimately, formal certification confirming not one, not two, but three separate, genuine mint errors present on a single coin, a discovery so significant that it quickly became one of the most talked about error coin finds in recent memory. When the coin finally crossed the auction block, competitive bidding between serious collectors and dedicated error coin specialists pushed the final price to that incredible $65,000 result, a number that instantly cemented this particular 1974 quarter as one of the crown jewels of modern error coin collecting. Now let's talk, one final time, about the grading and authentication process, because a coin of this significance requires the absolute highest level of scrutiny available in the hobby. PCGS and NGC both maintain teams of specialized error coin experts specifically for cases like this, where multiple overlapping anomalies must each be independently verified as genuine, mint-made phenomena, rather than post-mint damage or, in the worst case, deliberate alteration by someone attempting to fraudulently increase a coin's value. For a coin combining a double die reverse, a multiple strike, and a partial collar error, graders meticulously document each individual anomaly, often consulting die variety reference guides and comparing the specimen against other known examples from the same production run to confirm consistency with genuine mint characteristics. Once fully authenticated, a coin of this caliber typically receives special recognition within the grading service's records, sometimes highlighted in PCGS coinfacts or featured within NGC's educational resources as a reference example of a multi-error rarity, ensuring its place in numismatic history is permanently documented for future generations of collectors. Given the almost singular nature of this specific coin, combining three major error categories simultaneously, population reports show essentially no directly comparable examples, making it, in practical terms, a finest known and top pop specimen not just for one error category, but for the entire combination, an achievement that very few coins in American numismatic history can claim. This extraordinary combination of rarity, verified authenticity, and compelling discovery story is precisely the formula that drives truly historic auction results, the kind of sale that gets discussed at coin shows, referenced in collector publications, and remembered for years afterward as a defining moment in the hobby. And now, here we are, at the end of our journey through 5 extraordinary coins. We started with a doubled die quarter from Philadelphia, worth $19,000. We moved to a repunched mint mark and off-center strike from Denver, worth $23,000. We uncovered a wrong planchet and strike-through error, worth $31,000. We marveled at a brockage and die cap error, worth $48,000. And we have ended with this, a legendary error-trifecta, a double die reverse, a multiple strike, and a partial collar, all on a single 1974 quarter, worth an astonishing $65,000. 5 coins. 5 ordinary-looking quarters. 5 hidden fortunes, each one sitting quietly in someone's pocket change at some point in history, completely unnoticed, completely unremarkable to everyone who touched them, until the right person, at the right moment, finally took the time to look closely. That is the entire message of this channel. That is why we do what we do here at Hidden Coin Value. Because somewhere out there, right now, in your own home, in a drawer, in an old jar, in a box passed down from a parent or grandparent, there could be a coin exactly like one of these 5 waiting, patiently, for someone to finally notice it. So before you close this video, I want you to make a promise to yourself. Go find your spare change. Check your old coin jars. Look through anything you might have inherited from family members over the years. Examine the dates, the mint marks, the edges, the surfaces. Because you never know. The next incredible discovery could be sitting in your house at this very moment, waiting for you to finally see what has been hidden in plain sight all along. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If these stories amazed you the way they amazed us, make sure you are subscribed to Hidden Coin Value, because we uncover treasures exactly like this every single week. Until next time, keep checking your change. You never know what fortune might be hiding in your pocket.